Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar, and coming up in the next hour. India hosts the second Voice of the Global South Summit in virtual format. It's going to focus on sharing key outcomes achieved at the G20 meetings under India's presidency. Israeli army says that they found a tunnel and weapons at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Also, a body of a hostage has been found from a building near the hospital.
Inside AI Shifa hospital, the engineering forces destroyed the infrastructure.
Australia win a low-scoring semi-final in the World Cup against South Africa in Kolkata, and they've set up a title clash now with India on Sunday in Ahmedabad. India is hosting the second Voice of the Global South Summit in a virtual format, and India is committed to consolidating its collaborations and convergences within the Global South. The summit, it provides a platform to discuss the outcomes from the various G20 meetings under India's presidency as well. The first summit had seen 125 countries participate, and that summit in January of this year had provided a diverse range of perspectives on the Global South. DD India's Akshay Dongre reports.
India will be hosting the second summit of the Global South nations on 17th November. The Voice of the Global South Summit will be held in virtual mode and in continuation with the first Voice of Global South Summit held in January during India's G20 presidency.
This would be an opportunity, tomorrow's summit, for sharing with the countries of the Global South the key outcomes achieved in various G20 meetings over the course of India's presidency. You would recall that during the first Voice of Global South Summit in January, this is one of the things that we did, part of what Prime Minister had said, reach out, hear the voices of the Global South and see how we can mainstream that, give them more attention and put them on the high tables. I think we have been able to do that, and I think this is a good opportunity to tell members of the Global South what has been really developments over our presidency.
During the first summit of the unique initiative, leaders from 125 countries of the Global South came together to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform. The second Voice of Global South Summit will be structured into 10 sessions. The inaugural and concluding sessions would be at head of state government level and hosted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The theme of the inaugural leaders session will be Together for everyone's growth with everyone's trust, and that of the concluding leader session is Global South, Together for One Future. In addition, there will be 8 ministerial level sessions with the following themes: Foreign Minister Session, India and Global South emerging together for a better future; Education Minister Session, Making Human Resources Future Ready; Finance Minister Session, Financing People-Centric Development; Environment Minister Session, Sustainable Solutions for Climate Resilience and Climate Finance; Second Foreign Minister Session, Global South and One Development; Energy Minister Session, Affordable and Inclusive Energy Transition for Sustainable Development; Health Minister Session.
In fact, let's go across live now. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is addressing the summit.
Excellencies, एक तो मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी जी, दूसरी वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ समिट के उद्घाटन सत्र में 140 करोड़ भारतवासियों की ओर से मैं आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत करता हूं। वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ 21वीं सदी की बदलती हुई दुनिया का सबसे अनूठा मंच है। भौगोलिक रूप से तो ग्लोबल साउथ तो हमेशा से रहा है, लेकिन उसे इस प्रकार से वॉइस पहली बार मिल रही है और यह हम सभी के साझा प्रयासों से संभव हुआ है। हम 100 से ज्यादा अलग अलग देश हैं, लेकिन हमारे हित समान है, हमारी प्राथमिकताएं समान है। फ्रेंड्स, पिछले वर्ष दिसंबर में जब भारत ने G20 की अध्यक्षता संभाली तो हमने इस फोरम में ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों की आवाज को आगे बढ़ाना अपना दायित्व माना। हमारी प्राथमिकता थी कि G20 को ग्लोबल स्केल पर समावेशी और ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक बनाया जाए। हमारी कोशिश थी कि G20 का फोकस हो डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द पीपल, बाय द पीपल एंड फॉर द पीपल। इसी उद्देश्य से हमने इस वर्ष जनवरी में पहली बार वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ समिट का आयोजन किया। भारत के अलग अलग राज्यों में हुई G20 की 200 से अधिक बैठकों में हमने ग्लोबल साउथ की प्राथमिकताओं को प्रमुखता दी। इसका नतीजा रहा कि न्यू दिल्ली लीडर्स डिक्लेरेशन में ग्लोबल साउथ के विषयों पर हमें सबकी सहमति हासिल करने में कामयाबी मिली। एक्सेलेंसीज, G20 आयोजन में ग्लोबल साउथ के हितों को ध्यान में रखकर ही लिए गए कुछ महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय मैं बड़ी नम्रतापूर्वक आप सबके साथ साझा करना चाहता हूं। मैं वो ऐतिहासिक क्षण भूल नहीं सकता जब भारत के प्रयासों से अफ्रीकन यूनियन को नई दिल्ली समिट में G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता मिली। G20 में सबने माना कि मल्टीलेटरल डेवलपमेंट बैंक में बड़े सुधार लाए जाएं और विकासशील देशों के लिए सस्टेनेबल फाइनेंस देने पर जोर दिया जाए। सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स जो पिछले कुछ सालों में सुस्त पड़ गए थे, उनमें तेजी लाने के लिए एक एक्शन प्लान भी बनाया गया। इससे ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में चल रहे पॉवर्टी रिडक्शन कार्यक्रमों को बल मिलेगा। G20 ने इस बार क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस पर अभूतपूर्व गंभीरता दिखाई है। ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों के लिए आसान शर्तों पर क्लाइमेट ट्रांजिशन के लिए फाइनेंस और टेक्नोलॉजी उपलब्ध कराए जाने पर भी सहमति बनी है। क्लाइमेट एक्शन के लिए लाइफ यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरनमेंट, इसके हाई लेवल प्रिंसिपल्स को अपनाया गया। इसी समिट में ग्लोबल बायोफ्यूल अलायंस लॉन्च किया गया है। यह ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है और हम आशा करते हैं कि आप सभी इससे जुड़ेंगे। भारत मानता है कि नई टेक्नोलॉजी नॉर्थ और साउथ के बीच दूरियां बढ़ाने का नया स्रोत नहीं बनना चाहिए। आज आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस AI के युग में टेक्नोलॉजी को रिस्पॉन्सिबल तरीके से उपयोग में लाने की बहुत जरूरत है। इसको आगे बढ़ाने के लिए भारत में अगले महीने AI ग्लोबल पार्टनरशिप समिट आयोजित की जा रही है। G20 द्वारा डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर यानी DPI के फ्रेमवर्क को अपनाया गया है, जिससे आवश्यक सेवाओं की लास्ट माइल डिलीवरी में सहायता मिलेगी और इंक्लूसिविटी बढ़ेगी। वैश्विक DPI रिपोजिटरी बनाने पर भी सहमति बनी है। इसके अंतर्गत भारत अपनी क्षमताएं पूरे ग्लोबल साउथ के साथ साझा करने के लिए तैयार है। किसी भी प्राकृतिक आपदा से ग्लोबल साउथ के देश सबसे अधिक प्रभावित होते हैं। इसके लिए भारत ने कोएलिशन फॉर डिजास्टर रिजिलिएंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर यानी CDRI शुरू किया था। अब G20 में डिजास्टर रिस्क रिडक्शन और रेजिलिएंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लिए नया वर्किंग ग्रुप भी बनाया गया है। भारत की इस पहल पर इस साल को संयुक्त राष्ट्र इंटरनेशनल ईयर ऑफ मिलेट्स के रूप में मना रहा है। G20 के तहत सुपर फूड मिलेट्स, जिसे भारत में हमने श्री अन्न की पहचान दी है, उन पर रिसर्च करने के लिए नया इनिशिएटिव लिया गया है। यह क्लाइमेट चेंज और रिसोर्सेज के अभाव से उत्पन्न होने वाली फूड सिक्योरिटी की चिंताओं से लड़ने में ग्लोबल साउथ को सामर्थ्यवान बनाएगा। पहली बार G20 में सस्टेनेबल और ओशन बेस्ड इकोनॉमी पर बल दिया गया है। एक ग्लोबल साउथ के स्मॉल आइलैंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, जिन्हें मैं लार्ज ओशन कंट्रीज मानता हूं, उनके लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। समिट में ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन मैपिंग और डिजिटल सर्टिफिकेट को मान्यता देने के लिए अहम फैसले लिए गए। इससे ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में MSME सेक्टर और व्यापार के लिए नए अवसर खुलेंगे। एक्सेलेंसी, वैश्विक समृद्धि के लिए सबका साथ और सबका विकास जरूरी है, लेकिन हम सभी देख रहे हैं कि पश्चिम एशिया क्षेत्र की घटनाओं से नई चुनौतियां उभर रही हैं। भारत ने 7 अक्टूबर को इजरायल में हुए जघन्य आतंकी हमले की निंदा की है। हमने रिस्ट्रेंट के साथ ही डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी पर भी जोर दिया है। इजरायल और हमास के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में सिविलियंस की मौत की हम कठोर निंदा करते हैं। राष्ट्रपति महमूद अब्बास जी से बात कर हमने फिलिस्तीन के लोगों के लिए मानवीय सहायता भी भेजी है। ये समय है जब ग्लोबल साउथ के देश ग्रेटर ग्लोबल गुड के लिए एक स्वर में बात करें। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर के लिए हम सब मिलकर 5 C's के साथ आगे बढ़ें। जब मैं 5 C's की बात करता हूं तब कंसल्टेशन, कोऑपरेशन, कम्युनिकेशन, क्रिएटिविटी और कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग। एक्सेलेंसी, पहली वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ समिट में मैंने ग्लोबल साउथ के लिए एक सेंटर ऑफ एक्सेलेंस स्थापित करने का प्रस्ताव रखा था। मुझे खुशी है कि आज दक्षिण डेवलपमेंट एंड नॉलेज शेयरिंग इनिशिएटिव ग्लोबल साउथ सेंटर फॉर एक्सीलेंस का उद्घाटन हो रहा है। G20 समिट के दौरान मैंने भारत की तरफ से ग्लोबल साउथ के लिए वेदर और क्लाइमेट मॉनिटरिंग के लिए सैटेलाइट लॉन्च करने का प्रस्ताव रखा है। हम इस पर तेजी से काम कर रहे हैं। फ्रेंड्स, इन विचारों के साथ मैं अपना वक्तव्य समाप्त करता हूं। अब मैं आप सभी के विचार सुनने के लिए बहुत ही उत्साहित हूं और इतनी बड़ी मात्रा में आप सबकी सक्रिय भागीदारी के लिए मैं हृदय से आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you, sir. I now request the Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to inaugurate Dakshin, the Global South Center of Excellence. Thank you, sir. I now invite the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh.
Well, we were listening to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's comments at the inaugural of the second Voice of the Global South Summit. The Prime Minister had welcomed all the participants. He talked about the Global South always having existed, but this is for the first time that it is getting a voice, is what he said. And he said that there are more than 100 nations, but they all share common goals, common objectives. And he did point to India's presidency of the G20 in the last year and over the 200 meetings that were held in India. And all of them had the Global South on their agenda. The Prime Minister brought up a few points highlighted from the G20 declaration, and he said that the African Union becoming a member of the G20 is one of the things that were a highlight. He said that multilateral banks needing reforms, focusing on sustainable finance, another outcome of the G20. Also, the commitments of the global north towards all this has been put forward at the G20. He did talk about goals moving forward, such as climate finance, climate action, lifestyle for the environment, the age of AI, how to take it forward. We need a global partnership is what he's talked about, artificial intelligence. India is willing, he said, to share its experiences and best practices with the Global South. He talked about the CDRI, which is a Coalition for Disaster Risk Infrastructure. He also talked about risk management. He mentioned about the International Year of the Millets, and saying that that is one of the superfoods that is among the crops for climate mitigation. He talked about new challenges from the Hamas-Israel conflict, and he asked for dialogue and diplomacy to prevail. He said that we believe in one earth, one family, one future, and he talked about the 5 C's, which is sort of a building block. In a sense, they are consultation, cooperation, communication, creativity, and capacity building. So we'll get you more in our subsequent news bulletins, but still to come here on DD India News Hour. Finland to close some border crossings with Russia to deter asylum seekers. The International Court of Justice is due to pass a ruling on alleged ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. And the risk of a catastrophic flood drives people from a small Greek village to relocate. You're watching DD India News Hour. My name is Mark Lynn. Here's an update on the Israel-Hamas conflict and the Israeli military. They've said that they've uncovered a Hamas tunnel shaft at the Gaza Al-Shifa hospital complex. The army said that its troops had found a vehicle also in the hospital which contained a large number of weapons. The military also made public these videos and photographs which we are seeing of the tunnel shaft and weapons.
The army forces found underground shaft inside AI Shifa hospital. The engineering forces destroyed the infrastructure. We also found in the hospital Hamas vehicle that was ready to be part of the October 7 attack, but did not go on the road, and inside it was a huge amount of arms.
Israel's military said that its soldiers had found the body of an Israeli hostage taken into Gaza by Hamas in its attack last month. The Israeli military spokesperson said that the body of Yehudit Weiss, one of the hostages taken by Hamas militants, was recovered by troops in a building near Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza.
The body of Yehudit, may her soul rest in peace, was recovered by our forces. The 7th Brigade, which was scanning the area nearby the Al-Shifa hospital, recovered her body in one of the homes during the scanning. Near her body, we found bodies of terrorists who were holding Yehudit.
Israel has said that the military uncovered significant material in its operation at Al-Shifa hospital. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that the commandos were still searching through Al-Shifa hospital, and he added that the operation to wipe out Hamas is being done in a very precise and selective manner and very determined manner.
There are significant findings there. The operation continues and it is done in a precise, selective but very determined manner. The more we deepen this operation, increase the pressure on Hamas and erode more headquarters, damage more tunnels, eliminate more operatives and bring down more heads of organizations, the greater the chances of returning our hostages. Because the enemy only understands power, and we explain to him very well what power is.
The U.S. military, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke to the Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, and they discussed efforts to boost the transit of critical humanitarian assistance into Gaza. The State Department, in its statement, said that the two leaders discussed efforts to prevent the conflict from widening and to secure the release of hostages. Blinken also stressed the urgent need of alternative steps to be taken to de-escalate tensions in the West Bank. The U.S. Secretary of State also spoke with his Egyptian counterpart, Sama Sokri, and they looked at efforts to increase humanitarian aid to the Gazans. And this is an urgent need, is what Blinken said. Blinken also reaffirmed the importance of concrete steps to minimize harm to civilians in Gaza, reaffirmed Washington's rejection of the forced displacement of Gaza people. Mobile phone and internet services have gone down across the Gaza Strip due to a lack of fuel for backup generators. So telecom firms said that all energy sources sustaining their networks were depleted and that the internet monitor confirmed a major outage with communications out in the absence of fuel. The UN refugee agency UNRWA said that it will be unable to send trucks to pick up aid supplies for Gazans from the border with Egypt. This is from Friday onwards, which is today. Earlier on Wednesday, in fact, the first fuel tanker arrived in Gaza since the conflict began last month. So barely 2 days of transit. UK's new Foreign Secretary David Cameron visited the Ukrainian port city of Odessa on his first trip abroad since taking charge. Cameron met with his Ukrainian counterpart Dmitry Kuleba while visiting Ukrainian naval vessels in Odessa city, a regular target of Russian airstrikes. Cameron pledged to continue providing military support to Ukraine's war effort and until it's victorious in the war with Russia.
Continue to give you the moral, the economic, the political and the diplomatic support and of course the military support in your fight. And I'm also pleased to be standing on the shore of the Black Sea, where the Ukrainian Navy has had immense success in beating back the Russian Navy and taking far greater control of this vital maritime corridor.
A Russian artist, Alexandra Skochelenko, who replaced supermarket price tags with messages calling for an end to the war in Ukraine. She was jailed for 7 years on Thursday for knowingly spreading false information about the Russian army. The 33-year-old Alexandra Skochelenko is an artist from St. Petersburg, and she wanted to stop the conflict. And she appealed to the judge for compassion, wisdom, and to set her free. The artist, who has already spent over a year and a half in prison, has denied any formal charge of knowingly spreading false information about the army. And Finland will close some crossings on the border with Russia from Friday. Prime Minister Petteri Orpo said on Thursday that 4 crossing points in the south would close at midnight on Friday, while 2 in the north would stay open for asylum applications. The neighboring Norway, which shares a border with Russia in the Arctic, is also ready to close its border at short notice if necessary. Here's Trent Murray's report.
Well, Finland shares a 1,300-kilometre border with Russia. It is the largest border of any neighbouring European nation. But the president of Finland has announced that he will be ordering the closure of 4 of the country's 9 official border crossings. Now, the reason he says he is doing this is because the country is experiencing a surge in immigrants trying to cross the border from Russia. He has accused Moscow of engineering a problem with asylum seekers in order to enact revenge on Finland for its cooperation with the United States and NATO. What we are hearing from Helsinki is that there has been a large surge in people coming from third countries, in other words, people from outside of Europe arriving at that border with Finland claiming asylum. The Finnish are saying that the Russians are helping them get to the border as part of a scheme, as I say, in order to try and play geopolitical games, according to the government in Finland. Now, it is important to note this is not just happening in Finland, it's also happening in neighbouring Norway. The government there has suggested it too may be about to close its border with Russia because of a big spike in people arriving at its border claiming asylum. And this is not necessarily a new problem in Europe. We have seen this type of action before when immigrants were travelling through Belarus in order to try and gain entry to Poland, again a European Union country. And for people caught in the crosshairs of this, they are quite often desperate people trying to gain asylum or migration rights to the European Union, but they find themselves really caught up in a game of geopolitical chess between the EU and Russia. So moving forward as we go into the winter, we know conditions there are very, very tough for people trying to cross illegally. But what we are hearing is that governments across Europe are going to treat this problem very, very seriously. And if it comes to it, close the borders with Russia completely. Trent Murray for DD India, Berlin.
The United Nations Top Court will hand down its ruling on Friday on a case brought by Azerbaijan, brought by Armenia against Azerbaijan. The Armenians want the court to put restrictive measures in place to prevent what they call ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, a claim that Azerbaijan, of course, denies. Alex Kadia reports from Brussels.
It's now nearly 2 months since Azerbaijani forces stormed into Nagorno-Karabakh, uprooting the local self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh, which had close ties with Armenia. What followed was the exodus of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians from the region, leaving shattered lives behind. Armenia now says the few that remain are at risk of ethnic cleansing at the hands of Azerbaijani troops, and it wants the International Court of Justice to step in. Armenia is asking the ICJ to put in place 10 provisional measures aimed at protecting the rights of ethnic Armenians from that Nagorno-Karabakh region. The head of Armenia's legal team says nothing other than targeted and unequivocal provisional measures protecting the rights of ethnic Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh will suffice to prevent the ethnic cleansing Azerbaijan is perpetrating from continuing and becoming irreversible. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan has strenuously denied all of Armenia's allegations. The country's deputy foreign minister, Elnur Mammadov, said Azerbaijan has not engaged and will not engage in ethnic cleansing or any form of attack on the civilian population of Karabakh. The International Court of Justice is currently working through two similar cases linked to the decades-long conflict between the two sides. In 2021, Armenia filed a claim accusing Azerbaijan of breaching the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Shortly thereafter, Azerbaijan filed a counterclaim accusing Armenia of doing the same thing. The legal wranglings between an emboldened Azerbaijan and a weakened Armenia will likely carry on beyond this ruling, a ruling which even the court will have no practical way to enforce. Alex Kadier in Brussels reporting for DD India.
Let's take a look at some other stories making news around the world. A fire broke out in a warehouse in Mexico City's central borough, resulting in a plume of black smoke filling the skyline. The civil protection authorities confirmed no casualties and evacuated hundreds of people. Police in Ventura County, California, arrested Loe Al-Naji, who's suspected of manslaughter for the death of a Jewish man who fell to the ground during a pro-Israel and also a pro-Palestinian street demonstration earlier this month. And the incident occurred during the ongoing street protests over the military conflict between Israel and the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. The Greek farming village Metamorphosi is considering relocation following September's devastating floods. The village, located in the Thessaly plain, is expected to retain its name and it's going to store farm machinery in old buildings. But the Civil Engineering Department, it cites repeated flooding and also geomorphology for reasons for them to move. The village's 240 residents are mostly cotton farmers, and they have moved in with relatives or they are staying in rented houses nearby. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. Is the United Nations brokered first ever binding plastic pollution agreement in sight? And with the UN predicting 9% rise in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, a senior scientific officer at the WMO tells us more. Also, SpaceX's second Starship launch will try again on November 18. Stay tuned to know how that's going to work.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. India is hosting the second Voice of the Global South Summit in a virtual format, and it focuses on sharing key outcomes achieved at the G20 meetings under India's presidency. The Israeli army says that they have found a tunnel as well as weapons at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. The body of a hostage has also been found from a building adjacent to the hospital. And Australia are into the finals of the Cricket World Cup, where they're going to meet India after defeating South Africa in the semi-final in Kolkata. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the second Voice of the Global South Summit in virtual format, and addressing the summit, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, expressed the hope that the Global South, despite its long-standing existence, is gaining a new voice. And he emphasized the common priorities of over 100 countries. Mayor Modi reflected on last year's G20 summit, highlighting the focus of people-centric development, of the people, by the people, and for the people. Our correspondent Jessica Taneja has been following the summit, and she joins us with more on this story. Well, Jessica, you can briefly sum up for us what the Prime Minister said in his address.
Well, the Prime Minister has put his focus on putting the agendas of the countries of the Global South. You heard there, Mark. He said that there are a lot of challenges that are emerging right now, particularly the 3 Cs, the COVID pandemic, conflict, as well as climate change. Keeping in view of what more needs to be done for the region, the Prime Minister said in the last summit, there were a lot of deliberations made and a lot of positive outcomes have come, especially with relation to the disaster resilience network that was set up. A task force has also been appointed, as we've been told in the Prime Minister's address. And of course, more focus on artificial intelligence, which India aims to host the summit to bring in all the global stakeholders together. More than that, of course, emphasis on the importance of bringing in the African Union into the G20 fold. And of course, other issues that are likely to come up would see a lot of focus on technological and how collaborations in that field would perhaps yield more results in building that energized synergy for the Global South.
Yes, also, Jessica, the Prime Minister spoke about 5 Cs. He talked about consultation, cooperation, communication, creativity, and capacity building. And taking the theme of India's G20 presidency into the Global South, he talked about one Earth, one family, and one future. Put that into context for us.
Right, and he does put that emphasis on the kind of initiatives that will be taken under the 5 Cs, as you mentioned, looking at the kind of position India is in and the kind of economic activity that is being driven specifically now, keeping in focus with the Indo-Pacific as well, and how the Global South could collectively contribute and benefit from India's own tech mechanisms and, of course, its own, industries, is what India wants to share with the nations of the Global South. Instead of them being just merely recipients, India is hoping and providing them with resources that they would become participants and self-sufficient when it comes to these emerging needs that sort of keep or hamper the countries from being economically prosperous.
Yes, indeed. And with regard to artificial intelligence, India would also be conducting a meeting to share the best practices as far as these things are concerned, and also find regulations. Each country is trying to come to terms with the good as well as the bad of AI. And of course, the Global South can gain vastly, leapfrog in a sense by these kind of technologies, but also have to be careful. And India is in a position, in fact, to shepherd them in a sense, or shepherd the entire Global South, but also to share best practices. What's your take?
Well, we still have to wait and see as to what India is going to put out as its focus at the AI summit. But definitely, as the reasons you pointed out, there are global challenges when it comes to artificial intelligence. Various countries, primarily America as well as Britain, are in full research mode. And of course, there's a lot of resources being put in to understand what kind of benefits and what kind of challenges that AI is going to pose in the future. We already see a lot of challenges that artificial intelligence has been sort of tinkering with when it comes to, various other official work that goes on. You've seen deepfakes, etc. This is just one part of artificial intelligence. But yes, using the technology to the benefit of, developing economies and energizing economies, and what more could be done in that is what India is going to be focused on when it comes to AI summit.
A final question, Jessica, about Dakshin, the Global South Center for Excellence. Can you tell us a little bit about it? We seem to have lost contact with Jessica, but we'll continue to get you more information about the Global South Summit, which is currently on. But a large group of international negotiators and United Nations representatives are meeting in Nairobi in Kenya to come up with an international treaty to tackle the world's plastic pollution problem. According to the United Nations, According to the United Nations, less than 10% of the plastic waste created globally has been recycled. Interlocutors are hoping to reach a consensus on a legally binding agreement by next year. William Denslow reports.
An estimated 430 million tonnes of plastic is produced every year, but the United Nations warns that 2/3 of it ends up thrown away. Scientists say this is creating an ecological crisis. The social and environmental cost of plastic pollution is estimated to be between $300 to $600 billion a year. And analysts expect plastic production to double over the next 2 decades. In a bid to turn the tide, negotiators from nations around the world gathered in Nairobi, Kenya this week as efforts continue to reach consensus on a treaty to address the threat of plastic pollution. This is the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee's 3rd session, as it continues work on a so-called zero draft text.
This means rethinking everything along the chain, from polymer to production, from product to packaging. We need to use fewer virgin materials, less plastic, and no harmful chemicals. We need to ensure that we use and reuse and recycle resources more efficiently and dispose safely of what is left over.
A key mission is to see the world move from a throwaway economy to a reuse economy. But deep divisions remain on issues including whether to focus on cuts to plastic production or just the management of plastic waste. The INC3 meeting is slated to wrap up on Sunday, before delegates reconvene for another round of talks in Canada in April. William Denslow in New York reporting for DD India.
The World Meteorological Organization has warned of more extreme weather patterns and a further sea level rise, at least until 2060. The WMO released a report this week that shows that the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has reached record highs last year, and it worries that the trend is going to continue, because this is what Jody Jacobs found out when he was talking to the WMO's Oksana Tarasova.
The World Meteorological Organization says greenhouse gases in the atmosphere once again reached a new record last year. It says the future looks bleak as there is no end in sight to the rising trend, which it says will result in more extreme weather conditions. The WMO says despite decades of warnings and dozens of climate conferences, the world is still heading in the wrong direction. I spoke to Dr. Oksana Tarasova, the WMO's senior scientific officer, and asked her how worried we should be.
If the actions are not taken, then it actually threatens the whole humanity, because you can imagine if you have every single cyclone turning into something like a hurricane category 4, there are limits to adaptation. We need to invest substantially in adaptation, knowing what is coming. But there is a lot of the feedback loops which we don't understand. So even adaptation, we are doing it like semi-blind, so like you see with one eye, and then you move forward based on your best science and best guess. But our tools are not perfect, and as I said, there are many systems which we don't observe. So that's why we are calling for more and more actions, and actually really actions and not just talking, because there's a lot of discussions which we see in the press which are about the climate commitments. What are we committed and what are we going to do? I think that we need to move from what we are going to do to what we have done.
So, Doctor, what do these increased numbers in greenhouse gases actually mean for the world that we live in?
Well, the meaning is pretty simple. The more greenhouse gases you have in the atmosphere, we call them greenhouse gases for the reason they trap the energy, the thermal energy in the atmosphere. So the more gases we have, you can imagine it's like a thicker and thicker glass over your greenhouse, so you actually heat the thing which is under the glass. So the main greenhouse gases are the main drivers of climate change. And because there's so much energy in the atmosphere, The atmosphere releases the energy through extreme event. It's not like a slow cooking. It's really like either we're boiling or we are not boiling. So basically, you have an increased intensity of the extreme events, like droughts, more precipitation.
Doctor, so we're already so far down the road because the greenhouse gases end up remaining in the atmosphere for decades, if not centuries. So whatever we're going to be doing now is just going to slow the pace of global warming, right?
Indeed, the greenhouse gases do accumulate in the atmosphere. Let's say atmospheric methane has a pretty short lifetime relative to the other gases, so it's about 11 years. It's about 300 years, or let's say close to that. For some other gases, for nitrous oxide, it's about 100 years. For CO2, it's about 1,000 years. So, I mean, even in the 1,000 years, if you stop all emissions now, you would see some excess of CO2 in the atmosphere. So what should be, or what we should be prepared for is that at a certain point, as being projected by the IPCC, there will be a need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We will have to do it because even if you stop all the emissions, as you said, we accumulated so much, and it will take so long for the natural system to actually go back to the equilibrium. So we will go off the roof if we don't start doing that.
So you say that the talks need to end now and that action is needed. So what exactly should countries be doing?
There is a potential to use a renewable, so you can triple the use of renewable. There's enough energy in the atmosphere which you can actually use, and you can double the energy efficiency.
And it's initiatives like the Indian-led International Solar Alliance that could potentially steer the world on the right path. The alliance of countries wants to invest in solar energy, in especially the developing world, and in so doing, increase the use of clean energy and reduce the reliance on greenhouse gases. Jody Jacobs in New York reporting for DD India.
SpaceX is about to test its spacecraft flight for a second time as part of a wider mission with NASA to get humans back to the moon. The first flight blew up minutes after takeoff, and it's taken months now for them to get the clearance from regulators for another try. Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
SpaceX is hoping to be part of the next giant leap for mankind, 50 years after humans first went to the moon. A test window for the Starship spacecraft launch will open from Saturday, when the spacecraft is due to shoot up and then detach from its rocket. CEO Elon Musk said earlier in the year he sees about a 50% chance of it reaching orbital velocity, but even getting to stage separation is a win. That's better odds than when it first tested in April, when the Starship faltered within minutes after it took off and had to self-destruct, exploding over the Gulf of Mexico. Since then, SpaceX has had to wait for safety and environmental reviews, but has now been cleared by regulators to try again. The ultimate goal is for the spacecraft to play a part in NASA's Artemis moon mission, a return to the lunar surface in 2025, and even to put humans onto Mars for the first time. Caroline Malone in Washington reporting for DD India.
The Indian Minister of State for Defence and Tourism, Ajay Bhatt, is currently in Dubai for the Dubai Air Show 2023. During the visit, the Indian leader met his UAE counterpart, Mohammed Al Borwadi, and the meeting, it focused on reviewing ongoing defense cooperation and exploring new avenues for collaboration. Both leaders expressed gratitude by visiting the detachment accompanying India's advanced light helicopter Sarang and the lightweight combat aircraft Tejas participating in the Dubai Air Show. The Indian leader engaged with defense experts from both sides, fostering collaboration and reviewing existing cooperation. In the ongoing Dubai Air Show, In the United Arab Emirates, one of the most popular pavilions is the Advanced Aerial Mobility Pavilion. The pavilion showcases the latest innovations in urban air mobility, including electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, drones and unmanned aerial vehicles. Visitors, they can learn about their potential applications in a variety of industries such as transportation, logistics, as well as emergency services. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. The US President Biden announces progress on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework with 13 APEC partners, including India and much more. Starbucks' Red Cup Day event is disrupted by staff going on strike.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. And now some news from the APEC summit. Well, the US President Joe Biden on Thursday said that he would keep working to advance a Pacific Trade Pact, even as his vision for a regional deal to counter China's influence stumbled over his bid to strengthen workers' rights. Hopes for an IPEF trade deal were dashed this week. Biden also announced progress on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This is with 13 APEC countries, including India. As per the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative Sarah Bianchi, the U.S. and the Indo-Pacific partners, they need to regroup and recalibrate their trade pillar negotiations early next year. And on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit that's ongoing in San Francisco, the U.S.-India that's in San Francisco in the United States. The Indian Union Minister Piyush Goyal spoke to the media where he called for dialogue along with the world leaders and he said that it should be engaging.
It was a very engaging dialogue, and clearly the collective wisdom of all the leaders in the room was towards working as friends, as partners, and finding a faster pathway to a sustainable world.
And Goyal also said that development of India's positioning on the global platform, he said that the world leaders are looking forward to greater engagements with India.
They're very, very much looking forward to greater engagement with India. They hold India in very high esteem as a nation whose voice matters. The respect that I got clearly demonstrated that almost all the world leaders are very fond of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They had huge respect for him. Everybody was inquiring about him. And I can clearly see that India's position at the world stage has significantly changed. We are now being recognized as a very powerful voice and a consensus builder, a country and a leadership you can trust.
Workers at hundreds of Starbucks stores across the United States have walked off from their jobs during a key promotional event on Thursday. They demanded improved staffing and schedules. The walkout came on the coffee chain Red Cup event. That's a day on which Starbucks hands out free red-colored reusable holiday-themed cups to customers on their coffee purchases. But the Workers United, they've said that this event was one of the most infamously hard, understaffed days for them because the drink orders pile up and the employees end up at the receiving end of abuse from frustrated customers over long wait times. So the union represents over 9,000 Starbucks employees and about 360 U.S. stores. Well, in cricket news, from the World Cup, Australia are through to the final. The Aussies defeated South Africa by 3 wickets in the second semi-final in India's eastern city of Kolkata. Australia will now meet India in the title clash on Sunday. The semi-final was a low-scoring match. South Africa were bundled out for 212 runs, with the Australian pacers Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood wreaking havoc. The Proteas at one stage were 24 for 4 wickets. Then David Miller rose to the occasion, slamming a century and helping his side to put up a decent 212 runs on the board. Australia started well, with Warner and Travis Head putting on 60 runs for the opening wicket in less than 7 overs. But then the going got tough for Australia, losing wickets at regular intervals, thanks to some tight bowling by Keshav Maharaj as well as Shamsi, making for a keen contest. But the Australian captain Cummins and his fellow pacer Starc then batted with assurance towards the end of their innings, and they took their side over with nearly 3 overs to spare. That's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, which was formerly Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. My name is Mark Lynn. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks very much for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.